doesn't know what she's doing. I'm like, sit your ass down. You've had no experience, and the reason you're in charge is because you watch a lot of movies and because you're popular.
Ew.
Sit down and shut the fuck up, Carson.
I didn't even know what was happening with the whole movie thing because they gave like no information. They were like, "Oh, fill out this form if you want to be part of it," and I filled it out, and you heard nothing about it.
Yeah, no, that was 03 as well, because Carson just sort of like took control and everything. And I'm like, hi, hello, stop. God, that bitch makes me gag. Drop
Here.
bitch across campus.
October, Amy, Rita, Thomas, Catherine, Eden, Diane, Tommy, Jessica,
Here.
Lucian, Sohail, Alexander, Derek, Colin, Sybil, Tanmay, Amanda, Luna. So I do have a note that I have to talk about the Electoral College, but I just saw something very interesting. There's been a piece of legislation introduced in the spring.
Uh-oh.
No, I'm curious your thoughts.
Oh boy.
It would make it legal, and this apparently, Wisconsin has just adopted this, right? It would make it legal if you go out to a restaurant with your parents and you are 18, you can drink in the restaurant with your parents. If you're over 18, and if it is not a bar, but a restaurant.
Oh, I thought that was a bar?
No.
Are you sure?
Way over. I am positive that is not presently the case.
You can at your home.
You've been breaking the law.
You can do it at any age, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, you didn't hear about the attempt to create dehydration?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Through photosynthesis.
Me
Thanks to
too.
photosynthesis, you don't have to get some extra anymore because you now produce your own food.
Everyone can if they try hard enough.
So, before we start on today's topic, the Electoral College, I told you last week, how do we determine the number of electors by state?
I have been out.
So there are 535. 100 of those are in the Senate. So that means the House has 435. And that formula has stayed the case since the 1928 or so. We haven't changed it. It stayed, well, it was 431. We added 2 states. But, Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska and Hawaii are new states. At the time of World War II, there were 48. Illinois is 1818. We're kind of middle-aged.
Wait, what? So Hawaii wasn't ours?
Hawaii was a territory at the time it was bombed in the United States.
I said you're going to us right now in class.
Pearl Harbor
If I had
was
nail
not a
polish, I
state,
would prefer nail
it was a
polish.
territory.
Was it called? Was it always called Hawaii?
Hawaii.
The states get however many, they have 2 senators, right? So they always have at least 1 representative. So every state has at least 3 electoral votes. So you add them together. You add the Senate, which is always 2, plus your total number of reps, and that's how many electoral votes you get. And then it changes by census. Illinois, this state, had what? We dropped 1 in the last census because people are leaving the state.
Why?
Arizona and Washington State both picked up 2. So Arizona got 2 more representatives. Washington State got 2 more representatives. And again, the formula has, since the 435 is the same, what they do is they simply reorder things. And then if you're Wyoming and like nobody lives there, you still get 1 representative who represents the whole state, even though Wyoming doesn't have enough to actually qualify to have a full equivalent of a representative. Right? It's just how it works.
Just chop up the
What?
Yeah, we're like, You get,
Make him half the.
no, they'd have to give him like 1/4 of a representative. They'd have to remove several limbs in order to do that. Actually, if you wanted to really make it equivalent, you would remove 3/4 of the representative's brain.
Oh boy.
What that one?
Are you assuming that everybody in the world has a full brain?
Why take out their limbs?
What? That's it.
This is just making them immobile.
You make him late for the vote.
If you really want to make them 1/4 of a representative. So today's topic is what happens to the Constitution once there's no opposition anymore. So the Constitution has been adopted, and now the question is, how is it actually implemented? And so I'm going to talk about two people. I'm going to talk about two different ideas. Hamilton and Jefferson are the leaders of the two parties. And so I'm going to talk about Hamilton and Jefferson. Starting with Mr.
Hamilton up.
I thought that's what you said, but I didn't think that's what you actually said.
Fight the man.
Good luck. Some people would prefer to beat up if they were given a chance to beat up a historical figure. Some people would prefer Hitler.
So, there are these two clauses in the Constitution. There are a bunch of clauses. You'll notice in the study guide I give you several of them. There are a bunch of different sections. Yes.
Economy.
SA2 is irrelevant to the Constitution. I mean, if you want, I can give you all the due dates right now and pile on the stress.
Fight me.
I think it would be better if you just wait till after.
Fight me.
So we have the taxation clause. Remember the problem of the Articles of Confederation and the problem the country has in the 1780s, right? They have no way to actually collect taxes. Basically, they said, please give us some revenue. And the states are like, yeah, when we get around to it, like, never. And so the Constitution says Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes. And it tells us that it's actually going to reiterate what's in the preamble to provide for the common defense and general welfare. That's why they're doing it. It mentions that there's going to be, part of this has to do with borrowing money on the credit of the United States, regulating commerce with foreign nations among the several states and the Indian tribes. The interesting thing about this phrase, this one. The imposts and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. What does that mean? They shall be uniform throughout the United States. That's Yara?
They'll have the same taxes no matter where you live in America.
What do you mean they have the same taxes?
Like you won't be taxed more if you live in a certain state.
What this means is if you are going from Illinois into Wisconsin, Wisconsin cannot actually tax goods that originate in Illinois that go in Wisconsin. In other words, and this is very interesting, the Constitution at its origins created a giant free trade zone. Okay, the states cannot lay taxes that are going to limit trade between the states. They had this idea of creating a giant free trade zone from the very, very beginning. This would stop some of the problems that the states were having where they're putting different interest rates on their currencies also, because now they don't have currencies anymore and they can't tax goods crossing over the states. Eventually we'll actually create a interstate commerce commission in order to oversee the trade between the states. There's another clause right after this one, to regulate commerce. And then there's another one that ties in with these two, which I'm going to explain. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited time some authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Copyright, the intellectual property clause. It's interesting that it should be in there, in part, because because it's greatly ironic, and I realized this morning I forgot to mention that to my class. I remember to mention it to you before I let you go today. It's greatly ironic because remember the whole smuggling thing? Turns out that intellectual piracy was also landed properly. But I'll get to that after this. So let's talk about Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, as you know, becomes the Secretary of the Treasury, the first in the Washington administration. When he took office, the country had none of the 5 major components you would expect from a modern financial system. Stable money supply? Nope, didn't have it. Central bank? Nope, didn't have it. System of private banks? Yeah, to an extent. A system of private insurers? Nope, didn't exist. And efficient financial markets. It turns out we didn't have that either. In fact, if you wanted to get a loan, well, if you want to get a loan now, what do you do?
Go to the bank.
Huh? Actually, that's the old way.
Instill fear.
Okay, that's the key. They check your credit scores. And there's a huge gradation that goes by percentage. There are 3 different crediting agencies. All of you will eventually have a credit score.
What's your credit score?
My credit score is really good. I just got a copy of it this week.
Are you happy?
Oh, I am very happy.
Good job.
What do you use? Credit Karma?
Huh? No, this is my wife and I have applied for a loan from the bank so we can pull our scores. But there's a bunch of different gradations, and they do it by percentage, and then they give you a score. I think it goes to 800.
So when are you getting a Ferrari?
So anyway, now we have these agencies that actually report out. They keep track of your payments. If you're making payments all the time, that's reported. If you miss a payment, that's reported. The best way to get the best way to get good credit is to actually borrow money and make sure you pay it back. The best way to ruin your scores is to borrow money and not pay it back. Right? That's how it works. Back then, the way to get a loan was to actually know somebody who's well respected, and they would write a character letter. They would write a letter saying, Eden is of a good character, therefore you should give her a loan. And the person looking at it say, oh well, I know this guy, he's well respected, clearly I should give you a loan. The problem with doing that is Eden may very well be a good character, but as it turns out, is a very bad loan risk. It's just the fact that you have the letter, and the letter is just says, well, this person vouches for you, and they say so, but you might actually be a credit risk. On the other hand, you could be a bad character. People don't like you, but you're actually a really good credit risk. But you can't get a loan because no one can vouch for your character. So this was the problem. Hamilton doesn't entirely overcome that, although it does actually go through a change slowly over time. So before I tell you what he does, let me give you some perspective. Because in recent years, the political class in the country has become so shrill that it's easy to overlook some things. And the main problem is we keep electing people to office who don't know any history. And I'm talking a lot. The first Congress, which met in 1790, included 20 framers. These are people who were at the Constitutional Convention. Right? They passed a law that was signed by the president, mandating, with an individual mandate, requiring ship owners to buy medical insurance for all their sailors. Okay. In the second Congress, in 1792, we had 17 people who had been at the Constitutional Convention. They passed another one requiring all able-bodied men to buy weapons.
Requiring.
4 of these people actually voted against the bill, although Washington didn't sign it, and 1 of the same people actually voted to repeal it.
Did they buy firearms for them to hold, or did they keep them on?
I'm not sure exactly of the details. My understanding is that they're still using armories at that point. And the reason I say that is because there's another rebellion in Massachusetts in the 1790s.
And they went to go.
And they went to go capture the arsenals in Springfield, Massachusetts. And so I assume that's uniform across the states. In the 5th Congress in 1798, Congress actually extended that earlier mandate to buy medical insurance, requiring the sailors to be covered for hospitals. And in this case, they actually required the sailors themselves to buy the insurance. And this act was signed into law by John Adams. In other words, Obamacare dates back to the 1790s. Okay. Or at least a variation. The other thing to keep in mind, yeah.
What's the point of making someone?
In the case of the sailors, well, let me give you the example of healthcare now. If you are poor and you end up in a hospital, most hospitals will end up actually providing the care to you for free because you're poor. But those costs have to come out of somewhere. And so they end up passing on those costs to everyone else who's using the hospital. And so it would have made more sense that the person who was very poor, who was at the hospital, was actually somehow in the healthcare system to assure that that money was actually came back to the hospital in order to lower everyone's costs, which was what, for instance, the Affordable Care Act was intended to do. And it worked to a point. It has some little quirks that nobody seems interested in actually working out.
Didn't people think that was like against their personal freedom to choose whether they're going to find something or not?
But that's fine. They can believe that. But what I'm saying, the history tells us this goes all the way back to people who had signed were at the Constitutional Convention. So it's like that's fine. You can have the personal freedom to go against it, and then the consequence is the healthcare market will go back to the way it was. I mean, and I can deal more with this at another date. But the thing about healthcare that's becoming very, if it wasn't evident already, most people have no idea what they're talking about. Particularly people serving people in Washington, they don't seem to have any clue. Because there's some, they have these, well, here's the favorite stuff that we like about the Affordable Care Act, but we don't like this thing mandating people to have it. Like, the only reason the other stuff works is because people are mandated. You can't have like all of this and not have this. So you either have the whole package, or you can have socialized medicine where it's all government supported and there's no markets or anything, and then you have a different set of parameters. But nobody wants that either. So anyway, that's where we are. The other thing is that there is this notion that somehow when the government is doing nothing, the government's really doing nothing. And I don't know if it's because we have like a whole country of anarchists who actually don't know any theory, or if we just have people who just like, again, they kind of pick and choose. I like this stuff that says the government can't require me to do things, but I don't want to like this stuff. The fact is that even I'll use the term libertarian, coerces, right? If the government if it enforces contracts, somebody's coming out on the losing end. Therefore, you are coerced. If it's settling rights and obligations, somebody's coming out on the losing end. You are being coerced. If the government determines who is responsible for something, that's what the court is. Someone is coming out on the losing end. Therefore, you are being coerced. I mean, this is what governments do. I suppose if what you really mean is you want no government at all, well, that's a completely different discussion. In the early years of the Republic, the power of the federal government will be used to do a number of things. It will grant land to people and to corporations. It will kill off the indigenous people with the army. It will create private monopolies, create a transportation network. I'm going to talk about that. It will link the country together with the Postal Service. It will also set up tariff barriers. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And in the second half of the century, it will also get involved in crippling the unions, creating a stable money supply, protecting debtors, whether they are the entrepreneurial corporations with liability. This is called LLC, limited liability companies. In other words, it's permitting incorporation. So I'm using it the way the word is used now, which is the idea that government should be out of the way. And what I'm saying is government is never really out of the way unless what you mean by libertarian is anarchy, which is where that term originated. If that's what you mean, then we're talking about something. This is somewhat trivial, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. The colonial currency had been based on the British pound. Now that it wasn't available, remember the Spanish dollar is the prevailing currency. But because of that, the New York Stock Exchange was set up to accept 1/8 dollar trades. It's like, here's your 16.5 piece. They kept that until about 6 or 7 years ago. The New York Stock Exchange finally got rid of these eighth of a dollar trades. But they had kept it for a long time because the shilling was 1/8 of a pound. And so it had stayed on that for a long time. Our dollar comes from a German word, "Bau," which actually refers to in the valley. And the valley in question is the Rhine River Valley, because that's where all of the trade was taking place in Germany. And that was seen as a place of great commerce. The other place that was seen as a place of great commerce was the Mediterranean Ocean, or Mediterranean Sea, and therefore, for that reason, our United States are united by the twin pillars of Hercules, which happen to be on the two sides of the entryway into the Mediterranean Sea. One is in Spain, one is in Africa. States. So, Hamilton actually saw the need to sell debt. In other words, he saw the need for the government to borrow money, in part to pay back money that was owed to the European creditors. And so this remains the case when the bond market is all about government debt. The state of Illinois, for example, you might know that we have like the worst credit rating in our country. Or bad, the worst credit rating.
What's our credit score?
Bad. And when that happens, it makes it difficult for the state to borrow money. In other words, to sell bonds, because nobody wants to buy them because they're very high risk. They don't know what they're going to get back. Hamilton recognized that there are benefits to the bond market for challenge rate. In fact, in the 1790s, American bonds were the highest rated in Europe. Everyone wanted to buy American bonds because everyone trusted the United States to actually pay back its debts. And that remains the case to this day. We have never defaulted on a single loan that we have ever taken on as a nation.
What are bonds?
Bonds are, people buy stocks and they are investing in a company and they're expecting to get something. Bonds are the version the government's use. And the bond market is affected now by interest rates, and the government controls the interest rate, and that affects the bond market, and therefore it determines where people are either buying bonds or buying stocks. And the balance between the two is how you regulate the economy. Hamilton understood that. Hamilton had the most boring reading list of anyone you could possibly imagine. I mean, while other people may have been reading bestsellers, Hamilton decided that he was interested in reading old British financial books. And, it's the kind of thing where he walks into a bookstore, or no, he meets one of the authors of these books or something like that. No, he wouldn't even meet the author because they're all dead. He would meet like the relative of one of these people and say, yes, oh, I know you, I read your father's treatise on, taxation in Britain, and the person's like, oh, so you're the one who bought it. Literally. So he's very interested in this kind of stuff. He manages to get, the reason Washington, D.C. is located where it is, some of you remember this is in one of the songs, is because he convinces the southern states, Virginia being the important one, he convinces Virginia to give him a national bank so that he can do this in exchange for moving the capital between Virginia and Maryland and creating the District of Columbia, right? That was Hamilton's doing in order to get his national bank and in order to get these bonds. Well, the Jeffersonians would just say, well, it's no surprise to us, we don't like central banks. Naturally, Hamilton can't be trusted with. We get the first bubble in U.S. history. Now, when I say U.S. history, I'm talking about the U.S. since the Constitution. I wanted to say the first bubble in American history, we go back further, and the first bubble was actually in the 17th century. It was on land speculation. A bubble? A bubble, I'll talk more about this later in class, but we say bubble because the economy is going up, and then it bursts, and then it goes down. That's what happened in 2008, right? And so we say, we refer to it as a bubble because that's how it graphs out. A guy named William Dewar was cornering the bond market. He did that by buying up so many bonds that on any given day he could either buy a whole bunch or sell a whole bunch and cause the whole market to react to what he's doing.
Oh boy.
So that's what he did. Because he was speculating on the market. Speculating is that he's trying to manipulate the market to his own ends. Speculation is when you are expecting that the market's going to go a particular way, and you're trying to make a profit off that change. So this guy, Dewar, crashes the market. Hamilton's reaction is that these extravagant sallies of speculation do injury to the government and the whole system of public credit by disgusting all solar system and wild air and everything. He wasn't much of a fan of Dewar. So what is a financial genius to do? He saved the economy by having his department, the Treasury, purchase all of the government securities.
Oh my God.
That's exactly what they did in 2008, and they did it in 2008 because it's what they did during the Great Depression. We refer to this now as quantitative easing. Hamilton did it instinctively. So, regardless of what you think of Hamilton, there is a certain genius quality to it. It had the effect of stabilizing the market, which is, again, what it did in the Great Depression and what it did in 2008. Jefferson despised all of this. He thought that all this speculation could have been avoided by just not having a bank. And once Jefferson is president, he will do his best to dismantle everything Hamilton had put into it.
So iron bonds is part of government debt. So when the Treasury buys bonds, just clean out the
I have to tell you not to think too hard about this. And the reason is because all of the people who work in the Federal Reserve, when they're asked about quantitative easing, this is the standard answer. It should not work in theory, but it works in practice. They cannot explain why it is that it works. They buy up their own debt.
What?
Again, I just told you, don't think too hard about it. You just need to know what it does. If you try to figure out how it works mechanically, it's like pondering infinity. What?
We just use that money.
It doesn't, just let it go, okay?
But it doesn't.
I don't get it.
I don't understand.
Yes.
What year was
That's like 1896.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like mid 1890s. There is but there's more to be said, but let me get to the next part. So Hamilton dies tragically by hands of his birth, and his ideas don't go away. Even with the Federalist Party disappears by the 18 But this guy, Henry Clay, the senator from Kentucky, who will be actually in the new party called the Whig Party. Clay will actually take Hamilton's ideas and he will try to put them into action. It's not called the Clay system or the Hamiltonian system. We refer to it as the American system, but in fact, it's Hamiltonian. There were three interlinked components, which go back to what I showed you on the very first slide about Constitution, about taxation clause, and so on. There's going to be a tariff. What's a tariff?
It's like a
A
tax.
tax on imported goods. And it's intended to protect infant industries. Now, I can give you an example. So let's say we have a British company and it's producing some product that Americans are buying for $10. The problem is that there's a new American company that wants to produce the same thing, but they can't do it for cheaper than $11. At least making some profit. So the American government decides that it will, as much as it likes free trade, it wants to protect the domestic industries, and so it's going to put a $1 or let's say $2 tax on the British good, and then the American product will now be cheaper than the British good and give people a reason to be buying it. Now, what that does, that tax means the consumer is paying more than they should. But the benefit is it helps the domestic industry develop, and the tax that's collected, the government is now going to put into its national bank. And that national bank, among other things, is going to finance internal improvements, like, for instance, a canal system or a highway system, both of which it is going to build.
Besides the tax, so like that $11, if people that the consumer just get anyways, that goes to what that
Yeah, so there is there is something called a multiplication effect when it comes to these kinds of things. And so there are philosophical arguments that say, well, yes, but we think it's better if the consumer is just getting the cheapest product at the get-go. And then there's the other philosophical argument that says, well, yes, but keeping the domestic industry going also has a benefit. The argument about protecting the consumer has been on the defensive since probably World War II, and we've been moving in the other direction for 80 years. The idea that we want to reduce those kinds of taxes. Now, let me explain though, the tariff is going to be very important for a variety of reasons. You have any comments?
So the first bill, is it 18 or 17?
17. 17. So I will come back to the question in a second. So one of the first products of the American system, again, this is Henry Clay kind of leading the charge in the Senate. Hamilton is a couple of decades. Well, no, he's a decade dead at this point. They're going to. One of the things they want to do is they want to have these internal improvements, and so they need a way to get, for instance, a canal built. Canal here to connect the Hudson River with the rest of the river network I'm going to show you that connects to the St. Lawrence. Okay, now I'll explain big picture in a moment, but the result of that, when you actually build your canal, is it reduces the cost of transport from $100 per ton to $15 per ton. That's huge savings. And it increases the travel time or decreases the travel time from 20 days to get through there to 8. Now, when that happens now internationally, we just call it globalization. Okay? In this case, we're talking about capital even. You're not only speeding up the products that are moving through there, you're able to increase the volume because the products are cheaper, and because the products are cheaper, people can buy more of it. And so there are a bunch of, in terms of multiplication, this has great influence on the development of the economy. Now, all you need to do, now that you've connected the Hudson River, you can go into the port of New York, go all the way up the river into Canada, all the way through the St. Lawrence into the Great Lakes, down Chicago. Now all you need to do is build, I don't know, the Illinois-Michigan Canal, and you can connect Chicago to the Mississippi River and go all the way down to New Orleans, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, around Florida, and back up to New York. That is a very integrated system using just the water.
So these three chapters,
All the content.
Yes, you can think of it that way if you like. But the waterways are the main source of transportation. Now, eventually they're going to build the railroads, and they're going to use those limited liability companies. But remember, I told you that money is going into the bank, and it's going to be used to pay for things. So if, for instance, there's no income tax, so how does the government get any money? Well, almost all of it is coming from those tariffs, the taxes on imports. So not only is it protecting the domestic industry, it's the main source of revenue to keep the government actually working. At the time Hamilton is in office, the Department of the Treasury is the largest agency in the entire federal government. Do you know how many employees it had? 8.
So for tariffs, for how long, like we had on the ship for, it's like every single time a ship is imported, and that's just like one tariff. Does the government like the canal being built, or not?
The canals? No, the government, well, that particular canal was not actually, 90% of it was actually paid for by private funds. But this gets complicated because the early history of corporations, for example, was not in the kind of leveraged way that we understand it now. People were putting in money and expecting to make a big profit. What was happening then, people were putting in money because they know that the canal needs to be paid for, and there will be tolls on the canal. So investors will put in money, help build the canal, the tolls will be collected, and then they'll be paid back with interest in the money that they loaned in the canal. And then once it's paid off, the toll will go away and the corporation is dissolved. I mean, that was how they used to do it. It does help if you have the government to actually be able to support these things if you need it, and in order to pay for things like the military. So that's the main source of revenue. And one of the things that happens in the first half, 1820s, 40s, at one point, 90% of the federal budget was going towards the military, which was as high as 11,000 soldiers. Now, that's nothing compared to what it is now. And if we had a proportionate amount, if we had 90% of our budget going to support the equivalent size army, I mean, that's massive.
Why wouldn't they dissolve the corporation? Why not just keep going?
Because that wasn't how they did it. I mean, the understanding was that the canal is a public good, and it simply needs to be built. And so the people who were going to pull money to pay for that canal are likely to be the same people who are going to benefit from the trade on the canal. So they want the canal built because they happen to be merchants who are going to be selling their goods. So they throw in some money. The canal is built. They eventually get paid back the cost of their investment in the canal itself. And they're making their money on the actual trade. And so, they're not really thinking about it. That's a more recent development. They just didn't think about it that way.
Would like a loaner have to pay the toll?
Would a what?
Like a loaner, like someone that left the money?
Oh yeah, presumably, you're not going to get special papers. But the other thing that the government is going to do is build a highway system, and it will be, the highway system has always been the same. The one that Andrew Jackson builds is about being able to move the army very quickly into the frontier. So he builds a paved road in order to move the army from east to west. When we build the interstate highway system under the Eisenhower administration, It's the same thing during the Cold War. Our highways are all about being able to move the military from one place to the other very quickly.
Did we get the idea from
Like with the Autobahn?
Yeah.
I think that's highly unlikely, given that the United States always had more cars than everyone else. I mean, always. Even in the 1920s and 30s, the United States had lots and lots of cars, and everyone else has very few. In fact, during World War II, Britain is borrowing vehicles from the United States because they simply don't have enough. The Germans have it. It's during World War II is when Hitler's government actually they found the Volkswagen. Here's the best part about the Volkswagen. The Volkswagen was considered a Nazi car through the 1950s. No one in the U.S. would drive it. They're like, it was created by Hitler. We don't have no interest in driving a Nazi car. So Volkswagen did what every good company does. It hires a public relations firm to advertise the car as a kind of countercultural vehicle to the big, massive American cars that were being sold in the 1950s. They give their contract to a Jewish advertising company. So the Jewish advertising company sells the Nazi cars to the Americans. So
Wait, what's the company? I'm on Jew.com. What's the company?
the bigger problem is, have any of you ever driven through Wyoming in the winter?
What the fuck?
The highway shuts down. They actually have gates on the highways and they shut it down. They're like, nope, too much snow and no one's coming to save you, so we're shutting it down, go exit. And so everyone gets stuck in what's that? No, there is that problem. Oh, well, there's always some kind of hotel nearby. I once was driving in Wyoming in February. There was it wasn't a blizzard or anything, it was just really windy. The snow was blowing across the highway, so they shut it down. And I got stuck overnight in Casper, Wyoming. And it turns out I got like the last room in the entire town. So I have no idea where the other people were going who came in behind me. They're not concerned. They're just like, no, we're shutting the highway. So you get to the exit, you're coming up on the exit, and you see that the highway is shut down, and there's no way to go forward without going. And one time I spent a spring break, went out to visit family out west, and my wife and I were with my oldest daughter. She was like a baby. And we were driving through South Dakota in March, which is when spring break was. And there was a blizzard in South Dakota in March. So we shut down the highway and we got stuck in Mitchell, Wyoming for like 2 days. Maybe it was fine. She didn't care. I think they didn't drive to Wyoming. Yeah. There's no point.
What's the speed limit?
You're thinking of Montana. They dropped the speed limit at one time.
Wait.
Well, no, what was happening, all the people from out of state were getting in accidents, so they put the speed limit back up. All of this building of infrastructure, as it turns out, quite accidentally ends up being quite brilliant, because you'll notice the entire state of Illinois is sitting on a giant seam of coal. In fact, they could have, what? Yeah, no, that's still the case, that we could have called the state Coal-Illinois.
We should have.
Well, yeah, but then the extraction of coal then would be called colonoscopy.
I hate myself.
As it turns out, if you actually match it all up, you'll notice that the blue here, these are canals. The red are, no, I'm sorry, the blue is early railroads. I count on another slide. You'll notice that there's this concentration of railroads going throughout the north, the industrial center. And in particular, if you can match it up to coal, you would see that the coal country is getting a great benefit of moving the coal around the country. Yeah, there's another slide where we can put all this together. Yeah, you've seen it all coming from.
How did they figure out that the pole was like all over?
Well, they didn't initially know it. It was by chance that it all worked out. Britain has the same luck with the Industrial Revolution. All of the coal that they need happens to be sitting really close to the surface right there. So they're very fortunate. Well, no, and one of the explanations for why China doesn't develop the Industrial Revolution is it had all of the makings. It had everything it needed. The problem was all of the coal that's in China is really far away from the cities and really deep in the ground. There you go. As usual, you ask me all of these questions, and I'm going a little slow. Hamilton, not Hamilton, that was Hamilton. Jefferson, his nemesis, is eventually going to get to be president. When he enters office, he's going to give this idealistic speech about how the military doesn't need to be so big. What was the, remind me again from Thomas Paine's Common Sense, what was the belief about what the country wanted?
Everyone was dependent on the
Well, and the other part, which is, we just want to trade with everybody. And we don't need a standing military. What's the point? It's just a waste of money. We just want to trade. The reality is somewhat different because the Mediterranean, you've heard about the Pirates of the Caribbean, but you probably are not so familiar with the Pirates of the Mediterranean. As it turns out, we're living on the north coast of Africa in these Barbary states, as they're called. Are you familiar with the Pirates of the Mediterranean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
White dude.
The European countries, including the United States, were basically paying bribes to these people. They were like, look, tell you what, you pay us this money, we're going to extort this money from you, and we'll stop attacking your ships. That's what they were doing. In 1784, Congress actually put aside $80,000 American dollars and told Jefferson and Adams that they should begin negotiations with these people. That's what they did. You might know that the official policy today is the United States does not negotiate with terrorists. Well, it turns out we used to negotiate with terrorists. So this is what happens. Jefferson takes office in 1801, and the leader in Tripoli says, hey, we know that guy. He's the one we were able to extract $80,000 from.
Wait, what?
So now we're going to ask them for more money. And not only is it going to be a one-time payment of $225,000, but if you don't want your ships attacked, you're going to continue paying us $25,000 every single year.
Cool, me at life.
Huh? So Jefferson refused. Jefferson said no. The Pasha, as he was known, declares war on the United States, which probably seems like a bad idea until it comes down to the fact that the United States Navy was pathetic. There wasn't a Navy. Jefferson had just made a big argument about how the country doesn't need a Navy, and after all, we just want to trade. But they can't. So Jefferson dispatches, we call it a fleet in quotes. And the country ends up in 4 years of conflict on the coast of Africa, and eventually it leads to the Marines getting one of the lines of their official song.
What was the value of the US dollar?
That's totally irrelevant. They traded for all kinds of things.
Can I trade it for a
Everyone
hot
accepts
dog?
American dollar. All countries are trading in each other's currency.
No.
I mean, China owns us. They have more dollars than anyone, including us.
They have more dollars
Right
than
now.
anyone.
We will pick up on this when I see you on Thursday.
It's good.
Oh no, who moved him?